We're up bright and early here in Palo Alto. Welcome, everyone. I just want to thank everyone for being up this late in Manila / wherever you are in the world, especially to our panelists who are up bright and early either in the Bay Area or in New York. Again, thank you for being here, and I wish that everyone is safe amid the whole coronavirus situation. As a very quick introduction, my name is Vincent Yu. I'm a recent Stanford MBA graduate, class of 2020, and I will be your moderator throughout the event. So just to baseline everyone, I just want to give a brief background for what our goals are for hosting this event. So as participants, you know what you can get out of this event. I guess I speak on behalf of all the panelists to say that our Stanford MBAs have all had a net positive effect on our lives, to say the least. And I think that we want more Filipinos to be aware that this opportunity exists for our countrymen. And second is information about these programs and specific programs such as the Stanford MBA. Information is hard to come by. And so our goal for these 1.5 hours is to distill all the important information for you. Most of what you need to know for 90 minutes. And before we kick off, why don't I give us an agenda of what's gonna happen in the next 90 minutes. So right now for 5 minutes, I'm doing an ingress / a run through of the agenda, baselining everyone. A bit after now, I will hand you over to Allison, who will then share her screen and discuss the MBA admissions process and a brief background about the school. After that, we have an esteemed panel of alumni for the next 40 minutes, consisted of Ray Alimurung, Danica Jacinto, Edmer Maguan, Riche Lim, moderated by myself. So we have a fixed panel for you guys. And lastly, we have 20 minutes for an audience Q&A session. So for that portion, make sure you put up your questions in the chat box, and we will pick out questions that are relevant to most people. And then for questions that are more specific to yourself, just feel free to message me or the admissions committee on LinkedIn right after. So yes, right now I will hand you over to Allison, who will share her screen and give you a background of the MBA admissions process.
Good morning, and thank you. Let me share my screen. Good morning, everyone. I'm Allison Davis with the MBA Admissions Office, and I'm so pleased to be able to participate in this event. Big thank you to our alumni for organizing this. We would normally be in Manila in person doing this presentation. We come to Manila every single year, but of course the travel schedule was completely canceled because of the pandemic. So I'm really grateful to get to connect with you in this way. In the next 20 minutes, I'm going to give you a brief overview of the GSB experience, as well as the admissions process and financial aid. And this is the same presentation that we would be giving if we were on the ground in Manila. We also have online information sessions, and this is the same presentation as well. I would, though, first like to acknowledge that the times are really crying out for great leaders with the pandemic that's turned everything upside down. So more than ever, the world needs leaders who can manage uncertainty and really lead in a global crisis. Secondly, just as the pandemic is turning everything upside down, our office is responding to changes. So I would like to remind you to please consult our website for the most up-to-date information. For example, of course, we're now taking the online tests and things like that. So you'll find FAQs on our website that are constantly being updated. Finally, although our contact with you, unfortunately, right now is virtual, our office is here for you as you navigate your admission journey. Although our physical office is closed, we are fully operational, and our staff are available to answer questions via email or phone. So if you are contemplating a big decision like graduate business degree, these are probably the kinds of questions that you're asking yourselves right now. What do I really want to do? Will a degree from Stanford help me get there? And of course, can I get in? And those questions actually go back to an even more fundamental question of, what do I want to be when I grow up? So you know that feeling that we all had when we were little kids, that feeling of, I could do anything. You know, you haven't failed at anything yet. No one has probably told you that there's any limits or constraints on you. So if you were to put yourself back in that 7-year-old mindset and ask yourself, what is it that you really, really want to do? What would that be? Now, of course, for each of us, that answer is going to be different, but I bet there's a common theme having to do with having a life that has meaning and a career that has impact. At Stanford, we encourage you to dream big. We have a tagline, change lives, change organizations, and change the world. And the change lives part, that actually really starts with your own life and the changes that you'll undergo if you come to Stanford. And that's really the first step in your journey. We equip you for that intellectual, personal, and professional journey in 4 distinct ways. First of all, helping how you shape, how you dream and innovate. Secondly, helping you to learn how to influence others more effectively. Third, the GSB can change your sense of your place in the world. And finally, the GSB is going to broaden your community as you form lifelong relationships with bright and motivated people from all over the world. So first, shaping how you dream and innovate. Our location and proximity in Silicon Valley really create a perfect environment for design thinking, for thinking about new ways to solve problems. Students can take courses from across the entire university in any department. So you could be working jointly on a program with future artists, engineers, doctors, lawyers. Our program is also flexible enough that you can do a second degree. And it's very popular among our students to do that. 1 out of 5 of our students does pursue a second degree at Stanford. And that can be any master's that any department offers or the professional degrees at the law school and the medical school. Among our students, the most popular second degrees tend to be education, environmental resources, engineering, public policy, law, and medicine. Collaborating across disciplines really allows you to confront assumptions that you may have because of the perspective that you're coming from, and allows you to see things from another point of view. And that's actually really the secret sauce to innovation. Personal leadership development is an important part of the GSB curriculum. It's based on each student answering for themselves, why would someone follow me? Why would someone follow me? And so, of course, that means we're going to expose you to different leadership styles and frameworks, but it's not like we say, you know, here's 3 leadership styles, just pick one of these. It's really about digging deep into yourself, understanding your personality, your communication style, and in a safe environment, being able to try on different styles and get some pretty candid feedback. In your very first quarter, you're taking a course called Leadership Labs, where you start to hone those soft skills. So how do you motivate people? How do you have difficult conversations? This culminates in an all-day simulation called the Executive Challenge, where you'll actually put these skills into practice in a simulation. Typically, it's a boardroom situation with alumni. In the many electives we have of leadership, like, for example, interpersonal dynamics, which the students jokingly have called touchy-feely, you learn how what you say makes other people feel. And understanding that has a direct impact on whether you're able to inspire and motivate people around you. Third, the GSB can change your sense of your place in the world. Of course, in the light of the events of the last 9 months, what this means is changing. What does it mean to be global, and how do you lead in a global crisis? You will be challenged in your global experience requirement to think about the world around you and your place in it. Finally, the GSB will broaden your community as you connect with people from all over the world. In a class of only 415, Your classmates, of course, are going to become your lifelong friends, but they're also going to become your future business partners and investors and clients. The community will help you both while you're here as well as you move through the future journey that you set out for yourself. The Night Management Center is our home at the GSB, and its cornerstone, which you see here, says dedicated to the things that haven't happened yet and the people who are about to dream them up. I think that really captures the Stanford spirit. Stanford tends to attract people who see the possibilities in things, so we hope you're one of those people. If you come to Stanford, it will change you like no other experience you've had. As I mentioned, you'll become a more innovative thinker, more global thinker. You'll certainly become more confident and effective as a leader, and you'll be joining a really close-knit community that will challenge and support you throughout your life. Now let's go ahead and talk about admissions. One of the questions we often get is, what's the secret to getting into business school? Well, the truth is there is no secret formula. You don't need a secret formula. The 2-year experience, I hope I've conveyed, is a time of personal and professional growth and reflection. And this actually starts with the application, where we really invite you to help us get to know you and help us understand how an education at the GSB will get you where you want to go. We, of course, recognize that the pandemic may have impacted your personal or professional circumstances, and please rest assured that we take that into consideration when we evaluate your application. So these are our admission criteria, and we got a question submitted in advance that was asking how much weight the GPA and the GMAT or GRE have in the admissions decision. And we actually don't look at admissions that way. We don't evaluate applications that way. There's no weighting of particular elements. Our process is holistic, where we're looking at all the different aspects. And I like to think of each application as kind of a mosaic, where it has all the different pieces of the application, but different aspects will be shinier in your mosaic versus someone else's. And so it can vary, of course. You know, for one applicant, the intellectual vitality may really shine. For another applicant, it might be their demonstrated leadership potential or their resilience. Where do we look for evidence of these admission criteria in a concrete way? Of course, we look at your academic record, and you will report your GPA in the scale of your university, which I believe is typically 4.0 or 5.0 scale. There is no minimum GPA. You don't have to have any particular kind of academic background at all to come to Stanford. We'll only ask for your unofficial transcript at the time you apply, so you don't need to be chasing down an official transcript at this time. We do ask for the standardized tests, and you have a choice of GMAT or GRE. We absolutely do not care which one you take, so take whichever one makes sense for you. And again, just like the GPA, there is no minimum score. There's a wide range of GMAT and GRE scores in the class. We do require these English proficiency exams, and they do have hard minimums, which are listed here. And again, you have a choice of which of these 3 exams you want to take. However, if your university, in your university, the language of instruction was entirely English, you do not have to take any of these tests. For those of you who may have attended a university where English was not the primary language of instruction, then you would need to choose one of these tests. We also look at your extracurriculars and work history, which is where we're starting to evaluate that demonstrated leadership potential. The first thing you should know is you do not have to have any work experience to be admitted to Stanford. We admit people straight out of undergraduate and graduate programs. If we're admitting you out of an undergraduate program, we will typically defer you for 1 or 2 years. So you'll go out and work, and we'll hold a place in the class for you. We also do not require extracurriculars. If you have them, we're interested in knowing about them, because they may be another place where you've shown leadership potential. But of course, there are many people who just for various reasons don't engage in or have access to extracurricular activities in the community or in university. We do ask for 2 letters of reference, and these should come from your workplace, from a professional setting. If you're applying from a university or graduate program, it could be an internship, it could be a part-time job or summer job, paid or unpaid, but it should be a professional environment. One of the recommendations ideally would be from a current direct supervisor, but of course we understand there's all sorts of reasons you may not be able to get that. So you would choose the next best alternative, which could be a previous supervisor, for example, or a client if you're in a client services business, for example. Now, the most important thing with these recommendations is to really choose someone who knows you well. The most compelling letters of recommendation are ones that have specific examples and anecdotes that support their assertions. So for example, if we get a letter that says, she is the greatest person that we hired in the last 5 years, end of answer, that is not helpful to us. We really need to have examples and specifics of what made this person such a great hire, for example. We do also have 2 personal essays that are required. And I realize that for most of you, writing essays to get into university is not something you're probably used to doing, and it may seem very strange. Why do you have to write an essay to get into school? Well, at Stanford, we're constructing not only a class of students, we're really forming a community. And so we want to get to know you beyond your GPA and beyond your salary. So that's the purpose of the personal essays. The first essay asks what matters most to you and why. Of course, that's a very sort of fundamental question, but whatever topic you choose, whatever it is that matters most to you, we don't sit in judgment of that. So it may be something from your personal life, your professional life. It may be an idea that matters most to you. It might be your faith. So just choose something that really is meaningful to you and is a good vehicle to convey to us values, passions, influences, things like that. The second essay is why Stanford, which is a little more straightforward. You also have the opportunity, if you want, to answer some short answer optional questions that ask for examples of where you may have shown impact in any part of your life. We do interviews as part of the admission process. We interview about 2 or 3 candidates for each place in the class. Those are conducted after you apply. And of course, currently they're being done remotely, but post-pandemic, they would be in person, and we have a wonderful group of interviewers in the Philippines and also all over the world, wherever you are. The style of interview is behavioral based. So the interviewer is really asking you questions, not so much about what you did, but how you did it, because they're looking for certain behaviors and competencies. The best way to prepare for an interview like that is to look back on your personal experiences, your professional experiences, your successes, your failures, and really be asking yourself, how did I do that? And thinking about how you did that. They'll also, of course, ask you why you want an MBA, why you want to come to Stanford, so you want to be ready for that. I've talked a lot about what we look for when we evaluate your application. The one thing we do not look for is anything about your financial resources. So our admission process is what's called need blind. We don't know, we don't want to know, we don't care about your financial resources when we're making the admission decision. After you're admitted, that's when you start the financial aid process. Stanford's financial aid is awarded entirely based on need. We don't have any merit scholarships. The annual tuition is $75,000 a year. The full cost of attendance for a single student is about $119,000 a year, which includes, of course, housing and transportation and books and all of that. If you're coming with dependents, a spouse or children, of course, that cost of attendance is adjusted. The scholarships at Stanford, we do have scholarships. They're available to everyone, regardless of citizenship status, and again, they're awarded based on need. The average fellowship recently has been about $40,000 a year, and again, that's an average. Some people get more, some people get less. And our financial aid process is guided by, excuse me, let me move this cat. Our financial aid process is guided by these three principles that you see here. Access, meaning that that we want everyone who's been admitted to Stanford to be able to come to Stanford. Excellence, that we are able to bring in a competitive and diverse class. And finally, equity, that everyone is treated fairly and equitably. So as I mentioned, scholarships available to everyone. If that does not meet the full cost of attendance, then that's supplemented by loans, which again are available to everyone regardless of citizenship status. So this is the contact information if you want to contact our office. And again, as I say, we're happy to answer any sort of questions by email or phone. So thank you very much. I'll pass it back to Vincent.
Thank you, Allison. That was very valuable, to say the least. When I really enjoyed all these MBA info sessions, especially when I was applying to an MBA for my MBA, just because it distills everything you need to know in a short yet succinct 25 minutes. Unfortunately, the audience can't attend it. Really unfortunate that the audience can't attend in person this time. So yeah, let us transition to the next part of the event. So let me go ahead and quickly share my screen. So we're now done with the MBA admissions process discussion, and the next part of our event is finally the panel discussion with Pinoy MBAs. So reminder to panelists, please turn on your videos. So Ray, Danica, Rich, and Ed, turn on your videos so that the audience of 100 plus and counting can see your faces. And for the audience, for optimal viewing, just so you can see the slide with the panelists' faces / the video, I would suggest doing speaker view for now, but I will stop sharing my screen as soon as we get to the meat of the panel discussion. So structure-wise, for everyone, we will start by doing introductions across all panelists. Then I will ask questions in the following sequence of topics. First is questions about the panelist's Stanford experience. Second is to touch a bit on admissions, as Allison discussed, but only a bit, given that she's given so much meat on it already. And then finally, we can talk about the broad Stanford alumni community, both within Southeast Asia and across the world. Panel, just a reminder that for efficiency and to avoid potentially talking over each other, I'll call on you when it's your turn to speak, just because it's a very challenging environment to conduct a 4-person panel discussion over Zoom. And so, yes, why don't we start by doing introductions? So panelists, please briefly introduce yourself. Include your current location, because I know we have a very global panel today in different parts of the US / some people back in the Philippines. What you did for undergrad, what was your pre-GSB experience, and what have you done since / what are you doing now? Why don't we start with Ed, and then let's go to Rich, Danica, and then Ray. Ed, kick us off.
Yeah, sure. Happy to go first. Yeah, so Ed here. I'm the only current student who in the panel. So if anyone has any questions with regard to current student experience, how we're all doing with regard to COVID happening during the MBA, I'm happy to answer all those questions. And background on myself, I took up BA Communication Research in undergrad in UP Diliman. And from undergrad, bulk of my career has been spent either doing on-the-ground retail sales for L'Oreal, but then transitioning to bulk of my career with L'Oreal doing e-commerce, basically starting and growing the e-commerce business, being part of that team that did it in the Philippines. Right after that, I realized, I really wanted to do something in further in tech. So wanting to come to Silicon Valley and all of that, decided to apply for a Stanford MBA. And most recently this summer, I did a senior program manager role with Amazon, specifically with AWS. So happy to talk about any of those parts of my life.
Great. Rich?
Thanks, Vince. Hi, everyone. My name is Rich. I'm actually Vince's classmate, class of 2020. I graduated from Ateneo de Manila in 2013 in management engineering. Pre-MBA, my background was a mix of education and finance. So I was a part-time teacher in Atenea for about 5 years and was leading investment research for BPI for right about the same time. Post-MBA, I'm currently a co-founder and I lead strategy and finance for a startup called Erudify. They do education, financing in Southeast Asia. Right now, we operate in Indonesia via Danachita and Bukas in the Philippines. And I'm in Manila right now. And nice to meet you all.
Danica.
Hi, everyone. I'm Danica. I feel very lucky to be the rose amongst the thorns today. I graduated from UP Diliman 2010, business econ, and then started a career in finance with Credit Suisse. So I was in investment banking in both Manila for 1 year and then moved to Singapore where I worked for 4 years. Wanting to do a career change, I decided to apply to various business schools and then decided to go at Stanford in 2015. Right now, I'm based in San Francisco, currently in the East Coast in New York for work reasons, but based in San Francisco where I'm our Vice President of Operations of Museum of Ice Cream, and I oversee our global teams and global operations.
All right, Ray.
Hey, Vince, thank you. Hello, Allison as well. And good to see my colleagues. So I'm Ray Alimurung. I head Lazada Philippines. And pre-MBA, I was a project manager at Sykes, the pioneer BPO in the Philippines. Prior to that, I was an entrepreneur for 5 years. I founded one healthcare nonprofit and 4 small businesses, and all of them failed. Before that, I was a medical doctor. So I guess I'm out here for all the poets and the confused. Post MBA, I spent 4 years at Amazon in Seattle. And then I moved back just as e-commerce was about to take off or in the Philippines, in Southeast Asia, and got a chance to join Lazada under this German VC incubator called Rocket Internet. So basically been doing e-commerce for the last 12, I would say last 12 years, basically. Yeah, so happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Ray. Actually, I'll take this opportunity to briefly introduce myself as well. My name's Vincent Yu. I was a graduate of UP Diliman Business Administration. And then right before business school, I worked at Shell for 2.5 years doing oil and gas sales. Decided I wanted to do something more analytical and shifted to management consulting. So I joined Bain in Singapore. And now I'm heading back to Bain, but I'm transferring from the Singapore to the San Francisco office. I'm the last thorn to introduce myself among the many thorns, according to Danica in this panel. Okay, I will stop sharing my screen now, and then I'll transition to the panel proper. All right. So for our esteemed panel, our first question is, why did you decide to take an MBA? So let's follow the same sequence, starting with Ed, Rich, Danica, and then Ray. Why did you decide to take an MBA?
Okay, I guess this is freshest for me. Deciding to take an MBA, there are definitely 2 main reasons. One would be the personal reasons, and another would be the professional reasons. Just to run through quickly the personal reasons, as a member of the LGBT community, it's not really something that I can do in the Philippines. So getting an MBA would really be helpful in terms of settling down in a country where getting married is possible. But more on the professional reasons is I slightly mentioned it earlier in my intro that working in the e-commerce side of consumer goods company was a really interesting experience for me. But being exposed more and more to e-commerce, I really wanted to do it for one of the big tech companies in the world. And it's not like coming from my previous job, I could have just like easily applied. You know, there are all sorts of restrictions in terms of visas, in terms of, you know, education background. So I think getting an MBA really made sense for me in terms of the career path and career trajectory I really wanted to create for myself. And it also just seemed like the right time in terms of, you know, having enough work experience to really understand what I wanted next in my career.
All right, Rich.
Sure. Well, there's sort of a career and a personal component as well. I did not really plan on taking an MBA until about late 2017. I'm a horrible planner, but you know, when I did decide to take it, at that point, I felt like there was sort of a stagnancy in where I was going in my career, and I felt like having an MBA could accelerate that, or if not that, then encourage a pivot. And it's just sort of what happened, and that's sort of one component of it. And the second reason is really, at that point, I was trying to figure out what my thesis of like what I wanted to do with my life would be, sort of what problem in the world I wanted to solve. And so there was a lot of like this soul searching that I felt 2 years out in a place where disruption is the norm could like significantly help. And that's really what I got.
Great. Danica?
Yeah, so my dad and a few of my titos and titas all have MBAs, but I had never considered myself to actually apply. I felt I had a very successful career in banking at the time, and I did enjoy my work, but it came to a point, kind of like Rich, I really never planned it, but I wanted a new adventure. Personally, I was experiencing at the time like a very low point in my life, and I wanted to leave Singapore, but not necessarily return back to Manila yet. So the opportunity to chase the American dream presented itself, and I took it. And I think that even after business school, I was deciding whether to go back to Singapore, Manila, or stay. And I'm really happy with my decision and the opportunity Stanford has afforded me to be able to stay in the US.
Great. Ray?
Yeah. So when I left medical school, when I left medicine, the field of medicine, I remember a friend of mine going to me, you know, don't worry, it's not the end of the world. Maybe one day you take an MBA. And I told him, hey, buddy, there are many things I'm going to do in my life, but taking an MBA is not one of them. And I really didn't even know what an MBA was. Actually, when I finished college, I thought accounting, finance, and economics were the same thing. So if you don't think they're the same thing, you're already like one leg up from me. But a couple of years later, I had a friend who came home from the US, and he was taking his MBA, not in Stanford, but then he kind of told me that, no, this MBA is not about accounting, because I thought it was about accounting, to be honest. And he said, no, it's about building a kind of a network and also being able to think about what you want to do, what kind of impact you want to make in the world, and be able to do it. So that really spoke to me because I was almost like, oh, okay, so when you put it that way, okay, now that interests me. Right? And so really, that's what really interested me about taking an MBA, you know, being able to think about what I wanted to do in the world and being able to go and do it. Of course, at the time, I didn't know what I wanted to do in the world. All I knew is that I wanted to make an impact by helping the Philippines or helping Filipinos. And I thought, hey, you know what, maybe e-commerce is one way to do it. So let me go to the US and learn about this thing called e-commerce. And I thought that the path to doing that would be to take an MBA.
Great. It seems that the largely common theme is that there's an inflection point that leads all our panelists to suddenly having an epiphany that leads them to take an MBA. So now that we know the background of our panelists and what their motivations were for taking their respective MBAs, let's transition into asking questions about the Stanford GSB MBA program in particular. So panelists, I'm sure that you perhaps applied to multiple business schools or considered matriculating to another or different business schools. What made you ultimately decide to attend Stanford? What made Stanford seem different from the outside looking in? why don't we start with Ray and then Danica, Rich, and Ed. Basically a reverse of the sequence a while ago. Ray?
Yeah, so for me, I really wanted to go to business school on the East Coast. One of the reasons is because my wife was going to accompany me and she hates to drive. And so if you're on the West Coast, you need to be driving. I didn't get in and because I applied only to one school. So I suggest don't do that. But then the next year I applied to multiple schools and I did get into Stanford. I actually didn't even wait to hear about the other schools. But it actually made a lot of sense for me. And probably if I got in elsewhere, I probably still would have gone Stanford because I really wanted to get into the, into the tech and the tech startup scene. And it just makes absolute sense to do it in the school where Google was founded, Yahoo was founded. And at the time I was there, a stone's throw away was the hacker house where Facebook was growing. So it just makes absolute sense. Looking back, it also made sense at the time, but it wasn't that obvious to me in the beginning. But if the tech world, the tech startup world is something that interests you, I don't think there's any better place than Stanford.
Great. And just to plug, Rich and I actually lived in that hacker house. So we were staying in Mark Zuckerberg's house for like a full year during our second year. So sorry for interjecting. Danica?
No problem. Actually, also similarly was first thinking of going to schools on the East Coast, just given my finance background. But I didn't choose Stanford. Stanford chose me, and if Stanford comes calling, you answer. So I, without a hesitation, decided to go with Stanford. And it really put me outside my comfort zone because tech, startups, small communities, these weren't things I was used to. I was used to like large 1,000-person bank, finance. So this was definitely a great exposure for me. Another thing about living in California is you don't have to deal with winter and cold weather. You have beautiful sunny weather for most of the year. So for Filipinos, it's an easy transition. There's a lot of Asian food access, rice meals. So that's another plus. But I think one of the biggest things and strengths of Stanford is our campus. That image that Allison presented a while ago with the quote of dedicated to the things that haven't happened yet and the people who are about to dream them up, that's actually displayed in one of the buildings. And then you have footprints of Phil Knight tattered across our town square. And you have benches and buildings designed to make you interact with each other and develop lifelong relationships. And I think that's something that's very unique to Stanford and something I'm very grateful for.
Rich?
Sure. Well, two things for me. Well, today actually. So first is Stanford's focus on the soft skills development for me was one of the most attractive pieces of this curriculum. Coming from finance, right, you sort of feel like business schools should be about the hard stuff like accounting, finance, strategy. But Stanford's way of teaching you that being a leader is about communication and about caring and about listening. I think those are the things that make the GS curriculum quite. Second is really the philosophy of being a leader in Stanford is really very distinctive to me. And from my personal experience, people, especially early on out of undergrad, people always sort of maybe instill in you this sense that being a leader, you have to act this way, this certain like template or mold. And I think Stanford sort of teaches you that being a leader is about sort of molding the best version of yourself, whatever, however that may be. And that's something I really definitely felt sort of the last 2 years in Stanford. And sort of the last piece is, so I actually was one of the 5 joint degree admits. So I applied as joint MA Ed. And I went to Stanford because it's a fantastic education school. I actually didn't finish it, but just surrounding yourself with people who are passionate about the same causes as you whether they're in investing or operating, it really broadens your horizons and really you that to really like double down and pursue your passion. So, and that's really led me to where I am today.
Great. Great to hear that, Rich. Ed?
Yeah, I guess for me, aside from a large number of In-N-Out burgers on the West Coast, I think one of the I guess like two of the main reasons, and kind of mentioned earlier, Ray mentioned a lot about the tech scene here being very vibrant. I spoke a lot about, really wanting to make that pivot into big tech. And it really is a good location, an amazing location for it. And I would add to that, it's not to say that these companies don't allot resources to, send people to talk to the students in the East Coast schools. They absolutely do. They also have those programs. But I would say that if you're in Stanford, it's just, you can put in your hands the networking with alums who work in these companies, and you can actually meet up with them in person pre-COVID and probably post-COVID. But yeah, I mean, there's more in your hands that you can do. The school will still be there to provide resources. Probably more alumni coming during the networking events and all the we call them brown bag lunches for information sessions for these companies. But yeah, just your capacity to network will just be much larger with these companies. And secondly, like also to build off a bit of what Rich said about leadership style, something, one of the realizations I really had in Stanford is that, over time, you build a career. In terms of technical skills, at one point, you're gonna have as much technical skills as somebody else, or at one point, if you want to be like a general manager, there's no way you're gonna have be the best at a certain technical skill just because you're focusing on managing an organization or a certain group of people. So what I realized in Stanford is that you're really given what really makes you stand out eventually as a leader is definitely your style of leadership, and I think it's valuable to have that focus, and I do believe that the Stanford GSB focuses heavily on that.
Thanks, Ed. So you already chose to go to Stanford and you experienced the MBA. I want to ask the panelists, if you could choose one experience, a class, a project, a study trip, a career trek that you had while you were doing your Stanford MBA, one favorite experience, what would it be and why? Let's start with Ray, and then again, Danica, Rich, and then Ed.
I think one of the most enriching experiences I had was the GMix. Is it still called GMix, by the way?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So the GMix is this internship that you can do in addition to your internship, right? And so I spent 8 weeks in consulting as an internship in San Francisco, but then I had this additional 4 weeks of an internship in Mexico. So I worked in strategy in a hospital in a city called Monterrey in Mexico. And basically, I was helping the hospital figure out how to build medical tourism. At the time, they were doing only one doctor was doing medical tourism in that hospital, and he was doing it by himself. So the hospital was asking the question, how do we enable medical tourism? And so 2 of us were assigned there, and I was my co-alum was studying how to market it, and what I was doing was trying to figure out how to figure out which procedures, which specialties to enable, which was a great marriage between my medical background and the business experience I was building. And I got to also travel around Mexico, and got to brush up on my really terrible Spanish. But I think it was a very, very enriching experience.
Danica?
When I was in business school, I admittedly tried to do everything, and which has given me a lot of rich experience. I was president of our class. I joined various clubs, led a study trip, and all of these were very enriching. But just to provide some diversity of the experience, I want everyone to know, like, the 2 years at Stanford, I had the funnest time of my life. It was so much fun. And one of the social things I led and projects I led was the FOAM committee. FOAM standing for Friends of RJ Miller. This is an unofficial student group that organizes social gatherings every Tuesday night for students on campus or at nearby bars and establishments. And that's really a time for everybody to mingle, socialize outside campus, outside the studying, and get to know each other and share those experiences. And I did that for 2 years, and I just loved organizing these community building events for everybody.
Great. Rich?
Sure. I focused sort of the second chunk of my second year really on sort of education-related initiatives, but I would say sort of the most significant, memorable one for me was during the final quarter when Stanford moved online. I did a project together with a couple of like other first years from Ed's class actually to focus on like how to actually improve online learning experiences for like class delivery, and that sort of worked for like 8 weeks. And I think I've interviewed Vince a lot of times on this. It really reveals a lot, not just about pedagogy, but also about its impact on mental health, isolation, and for me, that having sort of the opportunity to like just speak to so many people, so many experts about a topic you really care about at a point in time when people sort of need it most, I think that really reveals sort of the opportunities to GSB. And if I could just take away one learning from one academic piece of my experience, that's sort of the most memorable one.
Thanks, Rich. Rich, your audio is a bit spotty, so if you could tinker with that before the next question, that'd be great. Ed?
Yeah, I think I want to talk about an experience a lot of us have had at the GSB, which is either giving a talk or attending talk. So I just want to describe what talk is briefly. Talk is an event for the class that happens once every week, and it's when 2 people in your class give a talk about their life story, their life experiences in front of the whole class, and usually it lasts from 25 to 30 minutes, and it's this really vulnerable experience for that person, and it's just every week it's just you that person giving their talk, this vulnerable experience in front of the whole class, and the whole class is being very supportive and listening to your story and all of that. And I think I like this part of the MBA and why it stands out to me the most. I actually gave my talk earlier in this year, and why it stands out to me the most is one, linked to earlier mentioning about, all the interpersonal skills you develop at Stanford, all the, Allison mentioned this, like there's this class called Touchy-Feely, and like how the program is very like touchy-feely and learning all about all this quote unquote soft skills, and how this experience really contributes to that part of the whole GSB experience. But the other part I would say is that when you choose to give a talk, which I did earlier this year, is that there's a lot of time for self-reflection. I do believe that, when I was applying to Stanford, writing my essays, I already did a certain amount of self-reflection, but this really gave me the opportunity to really think about, my life up until now. Now in the MBA program, not that it's not busy, but like, when you're in the middle of work, you don't really have time to just, spend a few hours sitting around thinking about, what's happened throughout my life. And I think just having that luxury to be able to do that was such a great experience.
Awesome. So now that we've talked about pre-Stanford and during Stanford, let's talk about post-Stanford. So next question is, what has the Stanford MBA done for your career thus far? I want to ask this question to Ray first, and then again, Danica, Rich, and then Ed.
Yeah, so I don't know if anyone of you has read the book Snapshots from Hell, written by a Stanford a Stanford GSB alum, but who identified himself as a poet, meaning he was a speechwriter, I think, for the Republican Party. And I think he mentioned something there that's very, he interviewed with Goldman Sachs and I think with Rupert Murdoch. And I don't think he ever took a job with either one, but he said something that really struck me, which was, it was his Stanford degree that allowed him to get those interviews. So a lot of the times what it is really is a yuppie gold card, right? It's a way to get in the door. When I finished, well, one thing is that the companies come to Stanford to interview you, right? I mean, I had so many interviews. I just left my suit in the locker just so that I could go to all these interviews. But that doesn't happen in every business school, right? Where the companies all come to you. And that's actually how I got my Amazon job. But then after that, I got a job in the Philippines running a small to medium-sized business. Actually, I managed the Nitopia business as COO when I got back. But chances are I probably would not have gotten that without the Stanford MBA. So it's a yuppie gold card. It's sort of a way in. Of course, what's important is what you do with it afterwards, right? There's a lot of people I know who get an MBA, but then end up doing the kind of work where it really didn't matter if they had the MBA or not. But I think it's a way in the door. It was a way in the door for me. Today, people still introduce me that way, as though it counts for something. But reality is, I think it's just a way in. And actually what you do afterwards is a lot more important. In terms of network, I wouldn't say I really used any, I mean, I love connecting with my co-alums from Stanford, but I don't think it really was something that's got me, a big business deal or the job I have today. Nothing to do with that. I think it's an amazing network. It's a great resource. Continue to be in touch with them. If I want to know what's happening in some other part of the world or any other industry. But I think really it's an amazing door opener, and that's what it was for me.
Thanks for sharing that, Ray. Danica?
If you had told me before business school that I would be like head of a team of over 400 people in the US in a fast growing startup, I would have never believed it. But I 100% know that it's because of my Stanford MBA that I was considered for these opportunities, that I was given trust and confidence to do this. And with your MBA, like the technical skills, it's easy to see that day to day that you're getting, you're learning new things, you're able to apply it, but it takes time to see when the maturity from the leadership classes and those soft skills start to emerge. And for me personally, when we had to shut down in March due to COVID, that was a really heart-wrenching time for me and the company, because we had to shut down the company for a while. We had to go quiet, and I had to be the person to make the tough decisions so that we could survive. Getting through hundreds of difficult conversations and making those decisions, I would have never been able to do without the foundation of learning from Stanford. There are literally classes called Managing Difficult Conversations or The Art of Self-Coaching. And I drew on these during this hard time in my career so that I could get through it, so that the company could get through it. And successfully, that's why I'm in New York right now. We were just able to reopen a museum in the middle of the pandemic. And I'm very, very thankful for that. Additionally, it's given me a network I've never had access to. When we were fundraising last year in 2019, every other investor that came through told my founders they knew me from Stanford. So my founders were just like, okay, just start joining the meetings and having the conversations with us early, since they all know and trust you already. So that was extremely incredible as well.
Thanks, Danica. Rich?
Sure. Sure. Is my audio clear now, Vince?
Yep, much better.
Okay, cool. So I guess beyond sort of echoing the door opening and fundraising and response and leadership tools that you get that Ray and Danica alluded to, I'm going to borrow sort of an analogy that a Singapore alum told me a few years ago, which was sort of what MBA feels like is sort of like if you are a ship, it's like the ship pivoted a few degrees in one direction. And so the difference you see may be marginal as you sort of leave the GSB, and it sort of magnifies as your career goes along. And that is sort of what I felt coming out of business school. And I was working off a screen in Palo Alto. When I got to Manila, it's the same thing. And so I felt quite the same. And I think bit by bit, you do see differences incrementally, and they accrue over time as people put more faith in you, would become willing to take a bet on you. And those small things that you see right now, I do think accrue and become big differences as your career matures down the line.
Thanks, Rich. I love that visualization. I will use that in the future. Ed?
Yeah, I think just for me, very concrete is what the Stanford brand name can do for you. And very concretely, I would say first is that a bit anecdotal that prior to coming to the GSB, but after I already knew I was coming to the GSB, was that I ran a podcast for a few months, and getting interviews just seemed to be much easier when you carried the Stanford GSB brand name, even if I hadn't actually started yet. But getting these interviews with people for the podcast was just people would suddenly reply to your cold emails and all of that just because you would have this affiliation. So I think opening that door was definitely one thing that happened. And another thing I would say would just be employment opportunities. Never could I imagine that I would interview for companies like Apple or Amazon, especially for their headquarter office here in the U.S. If I had not been, I guess you could say, if I hadn't had this stamp of approval from Stanford, because just getting in itself, you already go through this rigorous process. But yeah, I mean, those are things I definitely wouldn't have been able to do / opportunities I wouldn't have been able to have had I not gotten Stanford MBA.
Thanks, Ed. So we're approaching our last couple of questions. I just want to remind the audience that after this segment, we will do an audience Q&A among the panel, the audience, and Allison for admissions questions. So start thinking of your questions. All right, so we have our last couple of questions. This one is addressed to only Ray and Rich. So as the two people who are in the Philippines / the Southeast Asian region right now, how is the Stanford alumni community in the Philippines and broadly in Southeast Asia? And how have those communities helped you in your careers? Ray can go first.
Actually, I'm just gonna tell Rich to go first.
Yeah, Rich, you go first.
Okay, I'm happy to go first if you want. Okay. No, so the alum, I think in general in Southeast, on the GSB alone is pretty small compared to maybe in the West Coast. And I think that's by function of most people staying in the West Coast. But for me, the network, if you include those beyond the GSB, is very tight-knit and close and very supportive. All my mentors that I have, they've been willing to sit down and talk to me once every other week or once a month and just giving me guidance on both work and non-work stuff. And that's been a fantastic way to just develop as a leader and as a person. But tactically as well, as a sort of startup, most of my VCs have Stanford alums in them, and so that has helped open up a couple of doors. People I work with now in EdTech, FinTech is quite small, so the people, some of it are Vince and our classmates actually who I now currently work with, and just sort of the shared understanding of mission and having that sort of support network has been tremendously helpful, despite sort of the network not being sort of as.
Awesome, great.
Yeah. I think two things. No, first of all, the activity, the local activity is not with the Stanford community. Obviously, is not that it's not that active during these difficult times. But I think there's a couple of there's two things where I'm running into circles with the Stanford network, bumping into Stanford network. One is so the talks that Ed was talking about actually started in my year. So it started out called Talk '07, and it looks like it has resurrected. So now it's a Talk '07 version, but this time kind of people are sharing their stories in their current profession, in their current role. The only problem is they're all on Pacific time, and so it's usually at some odd hour of the morning. However, there have been a couple of talks that have come out of the Asia group, and so then I've been able to join those. That's pretty interesting. The other thing is one of my co-alums actually used to be the president of the #1 competitor of Lazada, but he has since left and actually put up a fund called Asia Partners, and they're looking at investing in the Philippines. And so I got to meet him and his team, and we got to talk about, I got to share about my experiences in the Philippines, and we're exploring of whether I could be an advisor in some of the startups they're looking at, which is something that really interests me because part of what I want to do, aside from trying to build the tech startup that I'm building, is also enable the tech startup community in the Philippines, either as an advisor and probably down the road as an investor. So I think it's starting to come full circle, I would say.
Yeah. In Riche's ship terms, Ray's ship has been going far. Has gone farther than most of our ships, and because of that, you really feel the ripple effects and the compounding effect of the GSB alumni community. More than 10 years out, and it's still quite strong and contributing to careers. So we've talked about the local/regional alumni community within the Philippines and Southeast Asia, respectively. Danica, Ed, I'd like you both to touch on the global alumni community. How has Stanford's Global Alumni Network helped you in your career? So Danica, you can go first.
When, just very fresh in my mind, when COVID hit us and it traveled westward later, so the Asian countries already got hit, they were already having protocol. I just sent out a blast message to my class and I was like, need help developing protocol for my business. If you've done it, please want to chat. And from there, I was able to build the structure, the framework, and our operating plan just from the guidance and resources that my class had provided me. The other thing is I feel very plugged in global events. So another example is when the Lebanon fires, bombings happened a few weeks ago. One of my classmates is Lebanese and he spearheaded a GoFundMe so that we could help survivors' families. And through these connection points, I just feel more impactful in the work I do. I feel more more involved in global events. And then lastly, directly to my business, but when we had to shut down in the US and we saw other countries were staying open or reopening, it was just a couple of calls. It was friends in Singapore, Thailand, who work in huge property developments or real estate companies that pulled through for me and got us opportunities so that we could diversify do what we needed to do to get business running on the other side of the world very quickly. So on a global scale, not just your class, you have access to all alumni. And in the Philippine scale, everyone on this panel, I hope this is reciprocated, but I feel like it's a good friend. And even though some I've only met digitally, but the community and the network have been invaluable in my career. Thanks,
Danica. Ed?
Yeah, want to give this perspective, I guess, as a current student. The Alumni Network has been, very, very helpful and a good resource as a current student. Just to give some context is that I mentioned earlier that I did my summer internship with Amazon, and I honestly think probably couldn't have done this as well or as successfully if I did not network with a lot of Stanford alums who are currently working at Amazon or had previously worked in Amazon. Not to say that they push my application forward. For most of these big tech companies, it's a very streamlined process. But just getting their advice, getting their tips, picking their brains on how they would approach certain applications, and maybe getting their help to nudge a bit here and there to like follow up on your application and all of that has been very useful for me as a current student. And I think aside from that, just broadly, not just about getting the job, but like learning about, is this really something you want to do even before you start doing it? And they're amazing resources will tell you straight up what the job is like, what the company is like. They would not sugarcoat it, just because there's this shared sense of GSB community. And yeah, and I think I found that to be already very helpful even as a current student.
Thanks, everyone. We have 20 minutes left, so we'll transition to audience Q&A. Again, if you haven't inputted your questions, I already see some questions on the Zoom chat. Please just put them there, and I've been noting down questions to ask the audience. A couple of caveats before we push forward. I'll be triaging the questions to either the panel or to Allison for admissions-related questions. And also, please don't feel bad if I don't pick your question, because I will try to pick questions that are more universal, aka like the concern of most rather than a specific question. And perhaps you can follow up with either admissions or myself privately if you still want that question answered. And I'll also provide that information via an email later on. So yes. All right. And then for the panel, I have the first question. Feel free to just chime in if you have an answer to this. Sandy asked, we've talked about tech advancement and opportunities. What about advancement towards social entrepreneurship and sustainability? How is the background of Stanford on this? Again, just feel free to chime in popcorn style if you have an answer.
I can take this in.
Sure.
Hear me?
Yeah, we do.
Okay. So it depends on what you're looking for, but Stanford's GSB plus the non-GSB classes have sort of a wide sort of array of classes you can take, ranging from impact measurement to actual operational execution of social entrepreneurship and along to investing in social enterprises. So there is that wide spectrum. If you sort of go deeper into the sustainability front, well, Stanford has the EIPER, the environmental joint major you could take. A lot of earth science, earth system classes, and out across the street are quite fantastic in terms of doing it. And you could also opt to sort of run your own business through one of the startup garages if you want to sort of pilot a social enterprise as well.
Great. Does anyone have anything else to add?
Yeah, we also have the Center for Social Innovation, so very focused and dedicated resources into whatever you want to do in that space. Classes with the D School, the design school, like designing for extreme affordability. These classes focus on giving you the right tools and network and resources to execute on more socially geared initiatives.
Great. All right. So next question, Allison, I think you can probably take this one. These are probably quick answers. So first one is, if you had, I think you hinted on this already, but maybe just re-chime on it because this question has come up a lot. If you had average grades back in college, would you have any chance at Stanford? And second is, how many years of work experience on average do people have?
Yeah, with the work experience, The average is about 4.6 years, but that is what reflects the applicant pool. So that's not because we're looking for people with 4.6 years, but that reflects who we see applying. The range is pretty broad though, from, as I mentioned, you can be admitted with 0 years to, you know, the most years in the class might be 12, 15, 17. I think the most I ever saw in the class was about 22 years of experience. In terms of the academics, and I saw that thread there about the grades and the academics, again, I would just emphasize that our process is holistic, so there is no minimum academic performance you have to have. We need to feel that you have sufficient preparation and aptitude to not just thrive, survive at the GSB, but thrive. So if you had weaker grades, you know, we'd be looking carefully at the GMAT and GRE. We also take into account what you majored in. You know, you might have been 2.9 in pre-med or electrical engineering, which is pretty darn good. So we do look at it in the context of where you went to school and the major. If you do have some kind of situation that happened in undergrad that affected your grades, there's a place on the application additional information section where you can provide us an explanation if there was something going on.
Great. Thanks, Allison. Another question for the panel. So this is kind of a job interview question, I find. So we've talked about all the different opportunities, your best experiences throughout the MBA. So panel, personally, what has been the most challenging experience for you while you were taking your MBA? Our job interview question.
I can take that. So when I was in school, I ran to be our class president. And a part of that process is a debate. And I had to be on a stage, looked across the stage, and it was 5 other men of Americans, a combination of Americans and international students. And that was so scary for me because I was scared I was going to fumble my answers. I was scared it wasn't going to sound as smart as the other folks on the panel, but putting myself through that, I think really taught me that I could overcome so many other things in my life. And I ended up winning that election with my co-president. So paid off as well.
Let me jump in here. I think one of the toughest things was being a poet, right? What they call a poet, which is a non-quant or a non-business background person. I remember asking a colleague of mine, a classmate of mine, after the first year, I said, what % of what we studied in first year have you seen before? And he said, oh, about 80%. I said, oh, really? Okay, because I feel like I've seen like 5%. So imagine I was kind of swimming, I was kind of having to catch up. The amazing thing though is that everyone wants to help you. Before any exam, there are all these review sessions, and then you get to the people who are experts or exempted the course are happy to sit down with you and work through it. Someone's gonna help you with your CV. Someone's gonna help you with your consulting. I had probably 20 practice consulting interviews, and everyone's just happy to have lunch or merienda with you to go through a case with you, so you have them for 1 whole hour. So I mean, it's difficult, but everyone wants to help you. I think just try to think about the smart people you know, and you know how some of them could be really arrogant. I really felt it wasn't like that at Stanford. Everybody, the smartest people, were actually the people who were most willing to help. So I think I found that to be the most challenging thing, but also it got me to be able to interact with a lot of people and make a lot of friends.
Yeah, if I can also just jump in here. I think one of the struggles I had really early on in my first quarter was dealing with, I guess, a level of imposter syndrome. Like you come to the GSB and you're surrounded by such amazing people who have done, you know, for a lot of them have done already so much even prior to getting here. And it really makes you, you know, doubt yourself, no matter what you've done in your previous career. But one thing I will say is that what really helped me with that was always keeping in mind that, you know, there's a reason. Once any of you here in the audience, you know, get into Stanford, there's a reason you get into Stanford. Admissions committee saw something specifically in your profile, and you probably know what that is. And just making sure you know, you share this part of yourself with your community, because I'd like to think about the Stanford community as, you know, you're all here to learn from the institution, but you're also here to learn from one another. Everyone has a very unique background. Everyone has very unique experiences to share. And I would say a good part of my learning here has really come from my peers and getting to know them, getting to know what they've been through in life, their work experiences. And yeah, just realizing where you fit into that puzzle.
Got it. Thanks, everyone. Next question for the panel is, I think this is a good question, especially because we didn't get to touch on admissions questions. Personally, what do you think made your application stand out? Again, I just want to remind everyone that before anyone talks, I just want to remind everyone that there is no like one formula for an application, and it is evaluated as a whole package rather than each criterion having a certain percentage points that adds up to a final score and a balanced scorecard. So yeah, feel free to chime in if something comes to mind, panel.
My Stanford application was very different from my other applications. The others were structured about like short-term objectives, long-term objectives. This is how the school will help me. My Stanford application, I really wrote from the heart. My personal essay actually had a lot of Tagalog in it that I translated. It just felt deeper in Tagalog. And I think maybe that made me stand out a bit. Who knows though?
It's a black box. Ed, Rich, Ray, anyone want to add? No pressure.
I'm going to let Allison jump in after I say what I'm going to say. Because I think I always hear this question, but if you stop to think about it, the question doesn't really make sense to ask, right? Because everybody only knows their own essay. In order for anyone on this panel to know what made them stand out, they would have to have seen all the other applications that year and then analyze them. So all we know is what we wrote. That being said, what should you write? And I would agree with what Danica was saying. Just you need to be writing from your heart. If that's not enough to make you stand out, well, then but that's you, right? That's the way I look at it, right? I'm not trying to figure out the magic formula of how to get in because I don't know it, and I don't think anyone here knows it. But maybe Allison, you know it. I don't know.
Allison, feel free to jump in if you have any thoughts to add. An official answer.
Yeah, you're right, Ray, in terms of seeing the whole pool, and of course the pool changes from year to year. And the truth is, none of the people on the panel know why they got in, and often people get in despite some element of their application. So they might have gotten in despite their essays or despite their interview. So having someone advise you on their interview or their essay might actually, mislead you, because they may have gotten in despite that aspect of their application.
Great. Next question is, was the MBA experience heavy academically? Or were you given enough time to do stuff like, for example, work or participate in extracurriculars, recruit outside of your academic studies? I think some people hinted on this, but if some people could further flesh out with examples, that would be great.
I can start with this question. As someone who's still going through it, I think one thing you'd need to figure out first is that what are your priorities in your MBA program? Academics is definitely one part of it and a huge part of it. But remember, this is probably post undergrad. This is this part of your education that you probably signed up for by yourself. I guess up until undergrad, there was this expectation that you would go up to undergrad. This one, you kind of, signed up for it by yourself, and it's up for you to really figure out what you're prioritizing. And given that, if you really do want to prioritize academics, it can be heavy. So I guess it's very conditional. Like, if you really want to excel a lot in academics, you can spend all your time on it. It's something definitely that's there. But to answer also this question another way is that, is it hard? As someone who specifically has not come from a very strong quantitative background and having a lot of, in the first couple of quarters, there's a lot of quantitative classes. I would definitely say I struggled quite a bit with a few of the classes, but yeah, that's more in like the first 2 quarters of the experience. But other than that, I would say it's been a very pleasant experience because I was actually learning about things I wanted to learn about.
The important thing to remember about Stanford is grade non-disclosure. So you never have to tell anyone what your grades was as long as you pass. And the effort to get from a pass to a high pass, that incremental effort is so large relative to the result that I found a lot of comfort and joy in my experience passing many things. If I got that high pass in there, here and there, that was great. But that gave me a lot of bandwidth to have fun, develop really deep relationships, and do a lot of extracurricular activities. Oh, correct. And Ed rightfully pointed out, there's also a low pass, which is still a pass.
Yeah, LPs get degrees, as they say.
So when I was there, we had one person drop out because he couldn't make the grade. And that's because there was a death in his family and he had to help with the family business, which was in France. But this is what I'm going to say. If the guy who had seen 5% of the material could make it, all of you have a much better chance probably than I had. I'm the guy who'd seen 5% of the material before. And I would say I still had a lot of time to do a lot of other things. But again, I can't remember, was it Ed that said that you need to be very deliberate about what you want to do when you're there? So I knew that, and I really, when I went in, I was very conscious about how I was going to spend my time. I said I was going to go on a study trip. I was going to lead a study trip and go on one, and I did both of those. I said I was going to leave here with at least 10 friends. If I made 10, I would be happy. I count today, I know a lot of people, but really I would say 10 probably are the ones I'm really close with. I said I wasn't going to do all the crazy parties, so I didn't do them because I was married at the time. So I didn't do that whole Las Vegas thing where you dress up as Elvis or something like that. I said I was going to play 2 sports, football and cycling. I ended up doing only 1. I was interested in family business because my wife has a family business. I said I would attend all the family business events. And I said I was interested in tech and consulting. So I really focused on those things, and you realize that if you're focused, you will find the time to do the things you need to do.
Thanks, Ray. Last question, and then let's transition to parting words of wisdom from each of our panelists. So for our last question, I've seen this question a lot. It was asked a lot on the survey forms, but I just want to. Best way to ask this question is, I guess I'll pass it to Allison. Allison, could you talk a bit about financial aid at Stanford? I know you touched on this a while ago, but I see people are still asking about it, so I would like to cover it again.
Sure. Yes, it's completely need-based. We do not have merit scholarships, so there's a student budget, which is currently $119,000, includes tuition of $75 and living expenses, all of that. And then we look at what you can contribute in terms of savings and things like that, and then we subtract that, and that's your financial need. And it is satisfied with scholarships and loans. The typical package is going to be a certain portion of scholarships. This past year, the average was 40,000, and then the rest is going to be loans. And I don't know if the panelists want to comment on, the payback period, but, our graduates do graduate with, among the highest salaries. So the payback should be fairly quick compared to students graduating from other schools.
Yeah, for those who took loans, maybe you could, if any, could you touch on, or if you still have existing loans, could you touch on like a payback period calculation? I know we have a couple of finance gurus in the house, or if you can't talk about it personally, maybe anecdotally from other people or a sense check average. I think that would be really helpful to the audience or the attendees. All right.
Can I just add one thing, Vincent? We do also have a loan forgiveness program. So if you go into nonprofit, government, social entrepreneurship, public sector at any point in your career, this fund will pick up all your loan payments. And we have had graduates who've spent their entire career in the public sector. They've had all their loan payments picked up. So if that's something that interests you, be sure to take a look at that.
Yep. And I guess I'm going to answer the question on payback period of loans and whatnot. There is enough data online. Stanford every year publishes average salaries based on exit industries on their website. So you could perhaps come up with a payback period equation based on the numbers there, depending on what your experience is, which industry you want to exit in. And I think that there are quite accurate quotations for how much the Stanford program, MBA program, is going to cost. But of course, that doesn't factor in financial aid, which Allison hinted to a while ago. So yes, let's go for final parting words of wisdom / advice. Let's start from Ray, and then Danica, Rich, Ed, and then Allison, and then I'm going to close.
I think Stanford has the best essay question, right? What matters most to you and why? It's like preparing for a thesis when you're actually trying to answer that question. And I answered that question, 15 years ago. And what I really find interesting is that it really makes you revisit everything you've done and everything you're going to do for the rest of your life. And while you're in Stanford, I encourage you while you're there to try to answer that question, try to continue to answer that question by deliberately exploring the things you want to explore. And I would say that I finally found the answer to that question about 4 years ago. And my advice to everyone in the group is continue to find the thing that matters most to you. And don't stop looking for it, because once you find it, it will be very satisfying, and it will define the rest of your career in your life.
Thanks, Ray. Danica?
Applying to the GSB, I failed. Well, I didn't get the score I wanted on my GMAT until the third try. I failed that test 3 times miserably. I was working a job where I was in the office for 14 to 16 hours a day. And I woke up extra early every morning, 5 or 6 a.m. to get 2 hours of studying and to make sure I passed that test. So applying to the GSB isn't just snap of a finger. It takes time, it takes hours, but it is all worth it for the return, for the friendships, for the experiences you're going to have and cherish forever. So my advice, more tactical to the people on the call, is once you make the decision to apply, take it seriously, carve out the time you need, plan ahead. And if you get in, the school will be there to support you, whether that's financially or with other resources.
Rich?
Sure. I guess I'd end with sort of this message, and this is quite difficult to have at this time, but sort of having faith in yourself and trusting that whatever happens to you, you know, is you'll end up where you're meant to be. And I say this because I need to empathize at sort of this stage in your career. It's so easy to feel like if you don't get in an MBA program, whether it's a GSB or some other program, you know, your career gets derailed, or your timetable gets shifted, and you know, you have to like reset your plans again. But I feel that even if this hour and a half was talking about how much we loved our GSB experiences, I do feel like wherever you're meant to go, you'll be there. And part of it is like just trusting that you're all gonna work out in the end. So even if you have to prepare for your application, it's not the end all be all of your life for your career.
Thanks, Rich. Ed?
I think for me, also very tactical advice for everyone here who's thinking about applying is that I think for a lot of people here, you're probably top performers in your job or doing very well at work if you are currently working. And I think that often entails that you're working a lot of hours. It makes it tough to really tell yourself that, okay, I'm finally, going to start either studying for the GMAT, writing my essays. There's a lot of steps to this application. And I definitely experienced this, making excuses like, oh, I'm too busy for work because of work, and I really have no time for this. But I guess we really have to think about how much do you want this MBA? And thinking about what the MBA can do for your career versus what your current job can do for your career. And not to say that you should not perform well in your current job, but also weighing that which one of these is really, going to contribute more to your career in the long term, and making that, cost benefit analysis, like that rough cost benefit analysis in your head. And really just, I guess for me, it took not making any more excuses and finally, being disciplined, carving out the time. And yeah, and once I started doing that, it wasn't easy. Danica mentioned earlier, it's not an easy thing to do, but it's definitely very fulfilling once, you get accepted into a program. And I would say if you really want to do it, you have to take a lot of discipline to, finally get it started and, get the ball rolling on it.
Thanks, Ed. Allison, final words on behalf of the admissions committee.
All right, yes. I guess I would just say, there's so much misinformation and advice and everything out there about how to get in. And I would do your best to just sort of block all of that out. As a couple of our alumni said, if you're writing the essays for yourself rather than for us, you're much more likely to be able to really put yourself across authentically. And there's so much about this process that you cannot control. You can't control who else applies, how many of them there are, how many have backgrounds similar to you. So I think if you really just focus on yourself, doing it for yourself, only you can be the best you that you can be. So there's no point, trying to focus on other people. And I think that would be my best advice. And best of luck to everybody.
Thanks, Allison. Couldn't have said it any better. So that's it for our panel. I know that there's some outstanding questions from the audience. So after the end of the session, I will send an email containing a couple of useful links and also a feedback form, because feedback is always a gift and we should collect as much of it as we can so that we can improve on what we're doing next year. Last, I personally am always open to chat on LinkedIn. I love talking about my application journey and helping other Filipinos throughout this arduous journey. So feel free to message me if you have any questions. And yeah, I don't want to speak on behalf of the panel, but I'm sure some of them are open to that as well, if not all. So yes, yeah, Danica just said on chat, yeah, sure, same. Feel free to connect on LinkedIn with any questions. Rich just raised a thumbs up over video. Ed also said, same here, add us on LinkedIn. So yeah, be in touch, everyone, and have a great evening. Good night / good morning / good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. And thank you. Bye.